Today we are going to be discussing collaborative and social learning and how it can be used into a classroom setting. We are going to begin by discussing what the two are. We will then discuss how they work. We will talk about why they actually matter in the teaching and the learning process, and then an activity of how the two can be used in a classroom setting. We're going to start with collaborative learning. Collaborative learning is a method of teaching and learning where two or more individuals are working together to investigate a topic or create a project or product. You see here a group of students working together in order to have one final product to turn in. There's a common goal amongst these students. Webster's defines collaboration as working with one another in a one-to-one format or a group format in order to achieve or to do something. And these students seem to be working together in order to achieve something. This is a cute illustration that has several words that go along with collaboration. The first thing I notice here is teamwork. In order for students to be successful in collaborative grouping, they have to have teamwork. They have to work together. A challenge is always presented. The students know the objective, they know their ultimate goal, and they are working towards that goal. Progress has to be made. Each student has to add something to that group in order to progress towards that final goal. There's success. When students work together, they're successful. You know, they add to, they build upon each other's information, and they become more successful when they actually work in a group setting. Next, what is social learning? Social learning is learning that takes place through interactions amongst others using social media, constantly meeting the demands of the changing technological world. A few examples of social media or social learning that students can use that I have posted here are Twitter, Facebook, and VoiceThread. Students are constantly being engaged with Twitter and Facebook for sure outside of the classroom. So if we can bring those things into the classroom, then students are more than likely to do what we ask of them to do. Social learning is when students are expected to gain knowledge from one another and then build upon each other's findings. You see here in this illustration that students are tweeting using Twitter, and they're making comments about what someone else has said. They're adding ideas, they're adding different links for students to look at. And this is just one way that students can be involved in social learning, and we can bring it to the classroom. We can have links posted dealing with certain things we're studying in the classroom on a Twitter page, and then students refer to that and build upon each other's findings there. If you look here at the bottom of this pyramid, I found this pyramid on the National Training Laboratories. Towards the bottom it says when students are actually engaged in discussion, they have 50% more of a retention rate than if they were just being lectured to or actually reading material. In those collaborative groupings, there's lots of discussion going on, and in that social learning atmosphere, there's a lot of discussion going on. When students are able to practice doing things, that retention rate goes up, and then when they are able to teach others, it goes up tremendously to 90%. When students are in the social learning atmosphere or they are involved in collaborative learning, they are teaching each other. They are building upon each other's findings. They are adding to, they're discussing with each other. So teaching is taking place there. So looking at this, when the retention rates of students go up, when they are able to actually discuss and teach others, then we as teachers need to find a way to implement this in the classroom. So what's the connection between collaborative and social learning? Well, if you look at social learning, Webster's defines that as relating to or involving activities in which people spend time talking to each other or doing enjoyable things with each other. We've already looked at the definition of collaborative learning. So when you put the two together, it's when pairs or groups of students are formed in order to work cooperatively with one another in order to meet a desired objective through the creation of a final product. If you look on the screen, I have several icons. I have a Facebook, Twitter, VoiceThread, YouTube icons to back up social learning. And then the other two, it shows diverse students having to work together in order to have a final product. They're piecing together the end solution, and that's collaboration. That's what we want our students to be able to do. That's training them beyond the classroom. That's training them for the world beyond the classroom. So let's look at how collaborative and social learning work. First, there's an individual accountability. Each student in these groups are expected to have a part. They're supposed to bring information and provide information for the total group finding. And if you look at the bottom of this slide, you see a group presenting about Berlin. There's one person talking at the moment, but each group member has brought forth something to this group that has made an impact. So they're each accountable for something. And then you have group findings. Together, the groups have to collaborate with each other and determine the most important parts or the most important information that needs to be presented to an audience. Student motivation is taking place when this is going on. When students are expected to bring part to a group and they are accountable for something, they're more motivated to do it. You know, more times than not, you see students are more motivated when they get to work with each other than when they are one-on-one with a teacher. And if we can provide that motivation and that specific environment for students, then I think it would be a great idea to do so. And then the learning environment. It cannot work if we do not provide the learning environment for our students. If we're going to ask our students to collaborate, then we need to provide an environment where they can come together as a group and discuss. If we're going to provide an environment for our students to take part in social learning, then we need to allow them to have access to computers. We need to provide that atmosphere where that learning can take place. Why does social learning and collaborative learning even matter? Let's look at the first one. When it's being taught, you know, our Common Core standards are pushing that students collaborate and work with each other. They're pushing writing. They're pushing a lot of things. And in order for us as teachers to actually do our job, we have to make sure that these standards are being taught in our classroom. It helps us as teachers to become more technology proficient. If we're expected to teach these things to students, then we need to be more proficient in them. It's fun. It's a change up in the classroom. When students are able to do something, they actually work together, and when we're able to teach them how to do it, it's a change. You know, everyone likes a little bit of a change every now and then. It's more fun. And it's also a way to provide more engagement with our students. As teachers, we're always looking for ways for our students to become more engaged in what we're teaching. And when we can provide collaborative and social learning for them, then there is more engagement there. Looking at it from the student's viewpoint, from the learning, why does it matter with learning? Several students were taking a poll, and here we notice that with their learning, it becomes more easy, they said. They said it's easier understanding of topics when they are able to work together. You know, peer tutoring and those things sometimes do play an effect here. It does help them to understand a topic easier when it's being told by someone else rather than a teacher. Some students said they have gotten more accomplished in less amount of time. Who doesn't like that, right? When you can get more accomplished in a less amount of time, then we feel like we've actually met our objective or our goal for that day. Collaboration. Students are expected to be able to collaborate not only in the classroom but outside of the classroom, so it's teaching that for them. They're able to learn collaboration. It's fun for them. Students love working together. They love building upon each other's ideas. They love creating projects. So it's fun. It boosts student engagement. When our students seem to be bored in a classroom setting, then we need to change something. So if we can allow them to work collaboratively or use social media as a means of learning, then it's providing more engagement. And students also are becoming more technology proficient. We are teaching them means that will be used outside of the classroom as well. What is an activity that we can use to teach collaborative and social media or social learning in the classroom? Well, with my class, I teach 6th grade language arts. And just a couple weeks ago, we took part in a persuasive argument. And the way I did this, we used collaborative learning, and we didn't use social media in it. And looking back, I wish we would have, but I've adapted this plan to where that you can use social media, and I will try it the next time that my students work on a collaborative project. The first thing I did, I provided my students with the objectives. I told them what I expected of them, and you'll see those in the outline that you're provided. You expect them to collaborate. You expect them to be accountable for findings in their group. You expect an end result. And the final thing that they were expected to do was to present their argument or their claim and then orally argue amongst another group. And I'll explain that just a little bit later. I posed a question to my students, and our entire persuasive arguments were based around this question. My question was, does social networking hold more positive or negative effects for teens? When I posed this question, a few students got it immediately, and then a few, they were having to think about it. So what we did, we divided up with just partners right now. I just gave each group a partner. They have a partner in my class, and it lasts for a few weeks, and then I changed their partners. And with their partner, they had to draw a T-chart and discuss off the top of their head the pros and the cons of teenagers using social media. And they had about 8 minutes to do this. And when they came back to whole group, we talked about some pros and cons. But before we did, with the whole group discussion, we talked about different types of social media. My students were able to take part in this whole group discussion and describe what types of social media they are using outside the classroom. Several examples of social media they were using included Facebook, Twitter, MySpace, Instagram, Kik. They were using Vine, and then some that I'm not even aware of, Small World, Tango. There were several that they were using. So when students were able to tell me these things and kind of teach me, I felt like that helped them a lot. They were able to discuss what they were and why they used them and what they actually took part in. So after we did that, we discussed some pros and cons. We had a whole group T-chart that accumulated all the findings of the partners, listing pros and cons of teens using social media. Later, I modeled for them a video of what I expected of them in the end of this project. And this project lasted a couple days, maybe 3 days. But the video I modeled for these students was of a 6th grade classroom that I found on the Teaching Channel website, and it's also listed on my handout. But on this Teaching Channel website, there was an argument placed amongst 6th grade students where they argued pros and cons of teenagers driving. And it really went hand in hand with what I was teaching them. And it was about a 6-minute video. They were able to see groups working together, and they were able to see them collaborate together to come up with arguments to back up their findings or to back up the way they believe. And then in the end, groups argued against other groups, and not a terrible argument. They were just trying to persuade us as the audience to believe the way they believe. And it was really neat for them to be able to see students their age doing this because it gave them more of an idea of what I expected. Later, students were expected to pick a side. They had to decide, are there more positive effects with social media in teenagers, or are there more negative effects with teenagers using social media? So once they picked a side, they went home and they decided on what they wanted to do, and the next day we divided up into collaborative grouping. In these collaborative groups, They were put together based upon the way students believed. Did they believe there were more negative or positive effects? So based on the side they chose, I divided them up into collaborative groups. Once they were with a group, research had to take place. Students were provided time in computer labs. We do not have a classroom. We do not have computers for each student, so we had to go to the computer lab, and during that time, groups were expected to research statistics and details to back up the way that they believe. Their final product had to involve at least 3 statistics on why their side, or why they were arguing their side. And this is what I did not do in my teaching, and I wish I had of. Google Presentations or even VoiceThread. I like both of those a whole lot. And with Google Presentations, students can begin working on their presentation in there and then share it with each other. And once they share their presentations with each other, they're able to access each other's findings, and they're able to write concurrently with each other. They can even share with me what they are finding in Google Presentations so that I can make sure that all students are contributing to the group. With VoiceThread, we could have maybe a picture or maybe a video backing up the way they feel, and each student contributes to that VoiceThread. They add to what they believe. They add it to it. When students can go back and see what other students are saying, or see what they're writing and hear what they are saying, it kind of is a basis for us to add to, and that's a whole part of the social learning, to add upon each other's findings. So Google Presentations and VoiceThread would have been an excellent way for students to collaborate with one another and to share their findings as well as with the teacher. It fosters collaboration this way. And then once they have their final presentations together, I had them put it together in a PowerPoint presentation, but like I said, looking back, it would have been in a Google presentation. The groups had to present their findings to the classroom. Each student was expected to take part in this presentation, and that just kind of depends on the teacher, what you expect of each student, but each student was expected to take part and to be active in the presentation. Once the presentations were finished, we divided up our groups again, and at this time, our groups composed an oral argument against another group. And this is what was most fun with students. They had spent several days researching and learning ways of why there are positive effects or why there are negative effects with teens using social media. And so once they composed these oral arguments, that's when it really got fun for them. They were able to back each other up. They were able to add to what each other said in order to support their group. And in the end, that's what we wanted. We wanted them to collaborate with each other. We wanted them to come up with a final product by working together. And that's what I feel like happened here. I feel like the collaboration in the social media was a great way, or is a great way, to be integrated into the elementary classroom through persuasive arguments. There's many other ways, but this is the activity that I chose to use with my classroom, and I feel like it went over very well. Very well. Next, we're moving on to them actually writing their own persuasive essay. So they're kind of using the same findings they found with the group work, but now it's became more independent, and they're working on their essays at the moment. But those are the ways that I feel like collaborative and social learning have been effective in a classroom. And I feel like it's a huge deal to be able to implement that into the classroom.